4 hours remaining. That's not even true. You're live, but your mic is muted. Well, I think this is unmuted here, right? But is Hey, if anyone can hear us, can they please publish a question in the live Q&A? That would be very, very helpful. Trying to make sure that we're currently working. Anybody, can you hear us? Hey, if anyone can hear us, can they please publish? Great.
A lag?
Well, it's supposed to be 10 to 20-second delay.
Oh.
Oh, we got 3 new. I hear, yes, you're good. Great, thank you, everybody. I'm gonna dismiss those because I can hear you. Yes, awesome. And you're all from outside Microsoft. You're fantastic. Really appreciate it. I'll junk this guy and we can get started in just a couple minutes. I will go light mode with the theme. See a little bit better. Let me see all of our smiling faces here. If I do this.
Camera.
Yep, zooped over.
I should have sat further from the screen. Big mistake.
How do I join this thing?
I don't think there's a way to have both the content there, which is kind of funny.
Is there a link perhaps?
Yeah, if you go to aka.ms/pscommunitycall.
Okay.
It just takes you to the ROC GitHub page, but then there's a link.
Oh, the invite had the AKA link.
Yeah, that's right. Join PS Call. It's another aka.ms.
It's the one that goes straight to the call. I have to update that one every month because you can't do recurrings. But really, I gotta get Tyler to just OBS this whole thing up. Open broadcasting software.
Oh,
Just like do it like a streamer. Because like I can do this like split screen, but then it puts our little like widescreen webcam content like in this little tiny box with giant black bars over below it.
Get twitchy with it.
Exactly. All right, we're gonna wait 2 more minutes just because we like to let the stragglers come through. Got 20 people so far. Streaming is just fine. Thank you. Just type streaming, no worries. You can hear me. Thank you, Prasoon. Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. Wait 2 more minutes here. Just let the stragglers come through, and then we will jump right into it. If I have this guy. Cool. Up to 25. It's about a good number. Questions? Cool. I'm probably end up needing a charger. I'll certainly end up needing a charger. Right back.
to add?
Yeah, this was just a starting point.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Plenty of time
We'll
for
talk about the DB7.
Cool. All right, let's get into it, guys. Meeting free morning where you can attend. I'm so excited, Thomas. Awesome. All right, let's get into it. So, PowerShell community call. I've got Rob, Sean, and Sydney in the room. Unfortunately, Steve could not be here today, but he'll be back shortly, and then hopefully for the next one. So we'll hop into it. We released the PowerShell 7 preview, so definitely give this one a try. We have moved to .NET Core 3, which means that we have a number of new APIs available to us that were not previously available. I think, Rob's been experimenting a little bit. We don't want to jump the gun too much because we haven't done extensive testing yet, but it would appear that a lot of the commandlets that were built using managed C++, we thought were going to require a recompile, and they appear to be working. So there's another set of modules. I think we've preliminarily sort of spot tested bits transfer.
Bits transfer looks good.
PKI. I think
KDS.
KDS is also in that boat. Provisioning, TLS.
Yeah.
And I think there's a couple more that I'm spacing on, but this was sort of this was like roughly half of our remaining modules or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they appear to just magically be working when you do a skip addition check.
Yeah.
In import module. So
anyway, we'll be following up with .NET.
Yes, we're going to talk to the .NET team. We're going to find out, why this thing that we didn't expect to work is working, and make sure that that is supported. And then subsequently, we'll be marking those modules as compatible if they are indeed compatible. So expect, more module compatibility going forward, which we had already said, but we are still following through on that. Also, check out this PowerShell 7 roadmap blog. So this one right here. I'm hoping it opens in the right. Yep, cool. So this is a bunch of stuff that we want to add to PowerShell 7. Obviously, the biggest change is .NET Core 3 with these new APIs, and the result of that is that we're going to be growing the compatibility. But a number of you have sort of asked us, hey, 6.2 was kind of feature light coming from the PowerShell team. Most of the interesting stuff came from the community, and that was sort of by design. As we've said, we intended the 6.2 release to be a bit of a maintenance stability release. We got some of our automation in order to drive down the time that it takes for us to deliver PowerShell releases out to you from when we snap the master branch. But now with 7, we do want to do some additional feature investigations. And Sydney's been following up on some of these, simplifying credential management, doing some logging off the box, both of these being potentially extensible models in the long run. Having a version notification. I don't know where this one currently stands, but we realize there are some folks that aren't getting notified of new releases and are sort of stuck on older releases. And while we can't fix that in the past, we can fix it going forward. But this means that the RFC repo is getting filled up with stuff that we would like to do in addition to stuff that the community would like to get into 7. So definitely give those a look. Sydney, did you get a chance to talk to Steve about the publishing of this one? Because I think this is.
It will likely happen in the next week or so, but we don't have a date at this point.
Okay, cool. So on that note, check out this thing. We've also got these popular requested features. So we recognize that there's a bunch of smaller stuff, and I should note that none of this is stuff we're absolutely committing to. These are all investigations that we're sort of understanding the cost of them and whether or not we can deliver them in the 7.0 timeframe. But these are sort of what I like to call delighters, which are smaller work items that are of a lower priority, but typically make people's lives easier. And some of those, like improving the formatting of error messages, having some on-error script block that can run on any error being omitted, control operators, which I think Rob's actually going to show a little demo in a minute. Ternary conditionals. This is using like a question mark as a ternary operator for assigning values based on whether some statement is true or false. Null conditional assignment is very similar. And then, of course, everyone's favorite parallelism of for each object without workflows. But as I go down this thing, I don't want to read the whole thing, but we're also investing in other places across the team. PS Readline 2.0 will ship as part GA as part of 7 as well. And then one of the things not noted here is that a lot of the work for PowerShell Get package management and PowerShell Gallery has been reorged under Steve. And so if I think I got Edwin on the call here, so if you have any last words on any of that stuff, Edwin, you're more than welcome to jump in. But I know Steve is pretty gung-ho about figuring out what we do with a PowerShell Get 3.0 and sort of a refactor of that to make people's lives easier, which I'll be talking about in a few minutes. But Edwin, did you want to say anything? I know I have you on the call here.
Not especially. I mean, I think Steve and I were on pretty similar pages about what we should be doing with PowerShell Get. Like since I first started looking at it, I was like, man, this is pretty complicated for what it does. We need to try and find a way of kind of cleaning things up. I gotta say, Steve's proposal is more ambitious than mine was. But a lot of the kind of ideas of how we might go about this are pretty similar. So I'm looking forward to see what happens.
Awesome. Yeah, and it's good to note there, the RFCs that we publish may very often be more ambitious than the work that we can actually commit to. So just keep that in mind as you're reviewing those. We very often define a sort of perfect state of the world, and then we pare it back to the 80% that gives us the most bang for our buck. Given the extra development resources on the last 20%. So just keep that in mind as you're reading through these. Another big release we had earlier in the month was, I think just a few days ago actually, or maybe like late last week, PowerShell Script Analyzer 1.18.1. So I have both Rob and Sydney here. Do you guys want to speak to that release?
I think it was mainly a bug fix and maintenance release. That's something that Jim, I think, was mostly focused on, and Chris Bergmeister as well.
I think there were also some significant performance improvements on
right.
1.18. And we even had more significant performance improvements in this last release. So I think that was the other big part of it.
Yeah, that's right. I do remember that now, that we went in and fixed a bunch of threading things and did some caching and basically improved the performance of Script Analyzer pretty significantly, which is good for CI/CD systems, but it's really good for VS Code PowerShell extension usage because it gets called as you type. And yeah, there were some pretty significant speed ups there, and in sort of unexpected areas too.
Yeah, so I guess on that note, if you haven't tried VS Code in a little while, since these past two releases, we have seen some performance improvements.
Yeah, so basically I think the big thing to note here is this use correct casing is now defaulting to false. And so this was a rule I think that was causing issues on you guys. Maybe Bergmeister and Jim were talking about this one, but this helped with the performance by disabling this thing. They're requesting that you guys test this by installing the latest version of Script Analyzer from the gallery. VS Code will automatically pick this up, but if you want to wait for the next VS Code release, it will be packaged with the latest Script Analyzer. So yeah, if you want to get these performance improvements now, just do an update module or install module on Script Analyzer and you'll get 1.18.1. Definitely check that out. Big deal. One thing I forgot to mention before, yeah, preview 2 for 7 is expected mid-July. That is going to have a bunch of additional PRs. Stuff's just been flying into 7 since we opened the floodgates there, so check that out. And I'll say install the latest from the gallery and VS Code. 1.18.0, and again, it's like double the perf from 1.18.0. 1.18.0 doubled or even 5x to the perf, I think, in some cases. So this is where we're and thanks to Bergmeister for making a lot of those changes. So let's talk about some of the RFCs that are up for review. So PowerShell Get 3.0. This one has been published. As Edwin said, it's very ambitious. I will say that it very often fails to load in my browser because there are enough comments that GitHub times out before it will come in. You'll see here the reviewers on the side are pretty significant. People have been really going hard on this thing, which is awesome to see. We really appreciate the feedback. So Steve's trying to really get all of these addressed, and it looks like 16 hours ago, actually, he addressed a lot of the feedback. So if you were someone who gave feedback already, or you haven't taken a look at it yet, come back here, try it out. I think the summary is that this thing is basically going to be a refactor, detaching it from package management, so that it will be a standalone module written in C# directly against the NuGet APIs, and then there's a slight semantic change on the way that we're doing the sort of network requests. So instead of doing a find module that goes out to the network on every single query to ask it whether or not there's a module that matches that thing, this follows the sort of apt or yum model where you download the latest sort of cache of the repository independently of querying that repository. So you have to do sort of like the apt update and apt install, as opposed to just doing the install and having that hit the web. But this should really significantly help with a lot of the synchronous network blocks. But there's also some other UI changes that have been made that will be very helpful. So definitely dive into this thing. I don't want to get too far into the nitty gritty, although if we have questions, we can certainly take them at the end of the call. Great. Has anybody been watching the chat here? I see lots and lots of questions coming in.
I have access to it.
Shout out for the test connection. Maybe I didn't add either of you guys. Can I promote you or something like that? I guess not. Sorry. I will make sure PowerShell PM is all added on the next one. So I have to manage this, unfortunately. So I'm going to keep publishing, but so chaining RFC. Current PR system is horrible as it's been shared. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, Kirk, which is just like the sort of RFC process all up. I want to take some feedback from everybody in general. Shout out for the test connection RFC. Should probably get some more feedback. That's correct. I will add a note here. So test connection to do. Great, minimize that. I'm the one who asked about the update to the WinOS. Did you have another question here, Mike? Mike, if you could publish another one that gives a little more detail about what you're talking about. Well-founded concerns between the differences between Bash, PowerShell, and the chaining operator. Yes, that would be very helpful. A bunch of formatting things on error, maybe be used to trigger a breakpoint on error. That would be huge to be able to trigger a breakpoint on exception in VS Code instead of guessing where the error is. I'm going to get back to that one. What is the roadmap timeline to ship PowerShell with Windows OS? What does that look like? We'll come back to that one as well. Actually, I'll just speak to that one right now. So I'll say in general, like we've offered no ETA on the sort of inbox, quote unquote, Windows aspect for a reason, which is that we're still very much working out what that means. I've publicly said that it's probably not going to ship into Windows in the same way that Windows PowerShell has shipped into Windows, in that there are a lot of changes to the way that inbox feature components work in Windows today. We're exploring a bunch of stuff right now. The difficulty is the length of the Windows support lifecycle in relation to the length of the .NET Core support lifecycle. So if I have an LTS branch, that thing has to be supported for 5 years plus another 5 years extended. And currently, .NET Core LTS branches are supported for 3 years. And so we're sort of investigating whether there could be some exception to us, or whether we can't ship within LTS branches, or we just make it easier through some other means to bootstrap or make things into the golden image for you know, for the purpose of sort of managing your own server image, or to have something in the gallery, or some kind of placeholder bootstrapper that will download the latest version. You know, there's a bunch of stuff that we're exploring, and to be honest, we're probably going to do a bunch of them in tandem. So, you know, we're still following up. I don't have a whole lot to share there, but obviously having higher compatibility makes all of these things easier across the board. So we'll have more information there. So Kirk says, why do you only promote push RFCs for review here? They come from the PowerShell team. There are other RFCs for review that community members contribute and would like to move forward. So again, I'm going to talk to the RFC process all up, and I know you've had some frustrations, Kirk, but you know, the ones that I listed here, I preloaded the notes. So this was like me last night going home, just sort of making sure that we had some talking points for this morning. This isn't a fully inclusive list of all the things we'd like people to review. There are a number of ones that need to be reviewed across the board. But you know, the thing that we've always said, which we might not be doing as good of a job on, is that if you plan to implement the RFC and you set that field as such, we prioritize those RFCs a lot higher. We have a lot of features that come in from folks that don't plan to implement, and it's not going to be as worth our time to review those RFCs, given that no one's going to turn around and implement them. But we do understand that we're blocking some RFCs right now that are planned to implement from the community, and we want to get those addressed. But you know, in a lot of cases, we do have business priorities that we set from within Microsoft, and that's why we, you know, put our full-time developers on those features, because we recognize that they're going to create a lot of value in the product for you guys and for the business, and you know, things that Microsoft cares about. And so, you know, those are the ones that we want to get moving, because we've got, you know, full-time developers you know, sitting here that want to implement that stuff. So we'll again, I'm going to talk more about the RFCs in a minute, but is there a list of these modules that weren't expected to be compatible available somewhere? I do want to put together a list. I have a very unpublishable internal list with a bunch of crazy notes on it and stuff.
The thing about that list, though, is that we keep driving it down, and every time we could publish it, there's another .NET release around the corner, or we do a bit more work, and it's sort of trickling away. But yes, I'm sure that we, you know, will eventually come to a point where we say, okay, here's a list of, you know, like where the state is right now.
Yeah, so it's like it's just a moving target, but I'd like to publish a list that sort of gives all the asterisks of like, hey, yeah, Active Directory supported, but only on 1809 and forward, and you have to install it via the RSAT, and you know, this, that, and the other, and I'd like it to also be Office 365 and also be Azure, and so, you know, there's I want to get that table published. I recognize it's important, and I think it's probably something that is you know, blocking a 7.0 GA. Like, I'd like it to be there for 7.0 GA.
Absolutely.
There's a quick question here about Windows Terminal. I will just say, you know, I've got the thing running here. This is my PowerShell preview, which is the default. And if I hit my drop down, you'll see I've got PowerShell Core, Windows PowerShell, CMD, and WSL. So yes, the integration is all there. You can set up your profiles, little cute little icons, have your tabs in the same thing here, and just switch back and forth, which is pretty sweet. Found some things with expression switches work nicely in places, so nice to have some fancy new C# toys. Awesome to hear, Joel. Great, so let's hop back into the notes here. I've cleared that out. So I'm going to add the test connection link, as Joel said. Another one I definitely want you guys to check out, this one has been super requested for forever, is the for each object parallel. So this one, Paul Higginbotham published, and it's basically adding a parallel switch to the for each object commandlet, which is where we landed after a bunch of feedback on a withdrawn PR that he had filed before. So definitely check this one out. I actually have not read it myself yet. Has anybody in the room checked this one out yet?
No, I read the old one, but not this one.
Yeah, me too. So I think this one's pretty new. If you care about parallelism, give this one a look. Chaining operators. So this one is the or and I think that I'm just going to have Rob go ahead and demo that one as something that is sort of more explainable through the demo, I think.
Sure.
The question is how the heck we do that.
Yeah, that's what I want because I can't join the call.
Can you plug into the room? Would that join you?
Yeah, we got a cable for that.
Why not take the notes here? It's probably a good idea, but then I don't know what format they come out in, and we publish them all to the repo, the PowerShell RFC repo. And if you go there, it's all in Markdown and rendered nicely in GitHub. I don't know what this comes out in. I know the transcript comes out in this crazy UTT format that I can't really do anything with, so I don't really want to risk it, to be honest with you. Does Windows Terminal integrate with Visual Studio Code? Not today, but I wouldn't rule it out completely. I don't know what they're planning there. But if we do this, then I've got content conference room, and it just kicked me out. And now you guys can everybody see that? Hopefully, I've got this as the live event. Does that come through for you, Sean?
Not yet, but
Wait 10 seconds.
Delay, I guess.
Something tells me it's not going to happen, but we shall see.
No, I think it is.
Really?
Literally
Waiting for-
replaced my thing, and it said live.
It has the red, which is promising.
Well,
Yeah.
I've got the.
There-
Hey, there it is.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Magic.
Okay,
Cool.
let's increase the size a little bit. Nope. Where am I? Let's just test if it works like this. Okay, right. Good. So in ordinary PowerShell, right, there is a grammatical recognition of this and operator. Like you might not have seen it there in PS readline because the highlighting on the screen is not as obvious, but that and is like slightly grayer than the text above it. And that's because since PowerShell v3, there has been a recognition of the double ampersand and double bar characters in PowerShell. But you can see from the error message that it says, well, this isn't a valid statement separator in this version. And the error message was written in anticipation that it was going to imminently be a valid statement separator. And it was one of those things I think just kept getting pushed into the backlog. If I start my branch of PowerShell where I've implemented this a little bit, which if you've ever worked in the PowerShell source code before, that's the command to do it. I can do something like ls and ls, and that will run ls twice, which is not a good demonstration, but I'll just explain what happens here immediately. So ls on my machine, which is a Mac, is not an alias, it's a native command. And if it succeeds, it sets $hook. So you get true at the end there. And essentially this double ampersand operator in Bash and in other Unix scripting languages will conditionally run the second command based on the success of the first one. And so because we have that concept in PowerShell of the $hook thing, and $hook in the case of a native command depends on the last exit code, but in the case of something like write output will also set success, but it won't set last exit code. To make that nice and useful, rather than looking at the exit code, we look at $hook, and basically this thing becomes ls, and if the last one succeeded, run ls again. So if I use echo, which is a, actually, is that going to work? Can't remember. Yeah, it's built in, right. If I use ls and echo hello, then it'll run all of the ls output, and then it'll give you hello as well. But if I use double bar, it will not give you hello because the ls succeeded. But unlike
So to clarify, the double bar means if the first one fails, run the
right,
second one.
yeah, exactly, yeah. But unlike in other languages, this doesn't just work with native commands. It works with PowerShell commandlets as well and functions. And so if I can write proper thing, when write output succeeds, it'll run echo as well.
Can you do a write error and show it failing?
Yeah. And so that when write output succeeds, the double bar means that echo won't happen. But if alternately I use write error, the double bar will mean that when write error fails, echo gets run. And if I use write output like that, write output never gets run because the error didn't succeed. So it's pretty simple in that respect, but then there are like strange long tail things that happen, like where does the job operator apply, or how do pipelines work? So in the case of PowerShell, for the moment in my implementation, the pipeline applies below the double bar. So you get write error high on the left-hand side, and then write output 1 pipe for each, the rest of it on the right-hand side. And so you get 1x only if the whole of write error high fails.
Awesome.
But anyway.
It's going to show up in preview 2.
So right now there's an RFC open. This is my sort of like proof of concept reference implementation, but because implementing this, there were some cases that weren't necessarily clear cut. I opened an RFC, and once that resolves, which I think has got about 3 weeks left on it, I'll go and implement those changes, or implement whatever is determined to be the right way to go in the RFC, and then that'll be in, I assume that'll be in time for preview 2.
Great. Awesome. And you want to dive into the PWSH-login, start getting set up?
Yes.
So this one, as Rob pulls it up, basically there are, in Linux, there's a concept of a login shell, right? Which basically means, hey, if I start a shell with this -L switch, it's going to run some extra profiles that have been placed in etc, and etc profile basically, and then go into other profiles based on what's in etc profile to essentially set up your initial environment. Because in Windows, your initial environment is defined by the shell, and so all your environment variables get pulled from the registry, and then if I start a console, it's going to be handed by the operating system all the environment that it needs. In Linux, all of that starts at an initial login shell, and so there's a bunch of environment variables that get set up in this profile that are expected for the general usage of an operating system. And so we break in a bunch of cases where you're not starting PowerShell from an existing shell. So for instance, if PowerShell gets added to etc shells and I try to SSH directly into PowerShell without calling into bash first, then I'm going to be missing a bunch of environment variables that will likely break general usage patterns on my machine. And so this is intended to address that by allowing PowerShell to have that initial login environment without having to be a nested child shell within bash. So you want to talk about that a little more?
Yeah, sure. So like Joey said, there are basically these profile files. Like this one is the user profile /.profile, which is like your user specific login profile, and it only gets executed once, and it's written in a POSIX shell syntax, and so it's kind of depended on for logging in, because most of the world has moved past a shell that has on Unix that is syntactically incompatible with this. Like nobody uses C shell really. And so there are a whole bunch of things that depend on this file being executed, and it might look, this is mine and it's pretty simple, and I've added at the top this export AA profile loaded equals true just to like show you what's going on. You might notice there's some other junk in there, but obviously PowerShell does not have the capability to run this file. It doesn't ship a POSIX shell execution environment in it, and so we have to find another clever way of doing that. And one of the suggested ways was to run, was to ship a different, like a shell script. Like if you've used PowerShell Preview, you might have seen pwsh-preview.cmd, which is what you're supposed to, it manages the call into PowerShell. And the suggestion here was to use pwsh-login.sh, which would use the bash executing that to run the login profile and then call into PowerShell. But the only problem with that is that it's not, for a a stable release. It means that you now have two options for how to invoke PowerShell, and it's just sort of like more executables, more noise. And I wanted to see if there was another way to do it. And there's no particular reason why we should go. There are pros and cons with both approaches, but basically the way that login shell environment usually works is it uses a thing called exec, and so that bash shell can run the profile, and then it execs PowerShell, which is basically like it wipes itself away and it loads PowerShell. But because exec is a system call, PowerShell is equally able to run that itself, and so I implemented that so that if you do, so again, I'm using the start dev PowerShell, but imagine this just says PWSH. If I run that with no arguments, and I do a profile loaded, I get nothing because that environment variable, that profile was never run, and that environment variable doesn't exist. But if I use, if I add to the argument list -login, and I re-execute that, I go and look up that environment variable again, it says true. Because what happened here is really early on in PowerShell's load, it sees that argument like before it does anything else, and it in memory constructs a bash script to invoke itself and execs that, and then the bash script execs PowerShell again. So there's no file system access, but most importantly, it is like pure PowerShell. You can execute the same executable. You pass a single flag, and it's able to do all the things that we would have needed a shell script to do. There's an RFC out on this as well. There's more performance testing to do because the real question is what's going to have the least impact for startup time, because it's very important to us. But this really is a demonstration of what I hope is a viable alternative to needing to ship another bash script and another asset with like a standard in the box PowerShell install.
Awesome. So I went.
Give you your screen back.
Yep. Hopefully, I'm gonna go.
You gotta reshare.
Share my content. Cool. So while Rob was talking through a lot of that, I was going ahead and adding some of the other RFCs that are currently up for review. I know a number of these are from Kirk, and Kirk, bear with us. I know, like I think these three you've added in the last. This looks like the. Oh, and I got missed the multi-line continuance. So last like month, you've got 4 of these here, which is it is. It's hard for us, right? I mean, we with all these things, like they require really deep thought and really attentive reading, and we're trying to figure out how to manage our time better because it's we got a week full of meetings. I was away, Sydney was away, Steve, Tyler all away for PSConf EU 2 weeks ago. I took a little vacation last week. It's summertime, and these things they stack up very quickly. And they really do require, it's not like email where you can sort of fire and forget, or deal with a bunch of quick problems or little bug fixes. It's like it really does require a very deep thinking discussion, extended period of time. And so I'm going to add this one here as another one for review. But I'll jump into the sort of feedback on the RFC process. So the one thing that we've been doing for the last 4 or 5 months now is having a dedicated RFC meeting. The issue there is that the conversation becomes very involved. We've experimented with the idea of doing transcripts of it or recordings, and generally speaking, while we're all friends in the room, the conversation can get a little heated. We do tend to take shortcuts with our discussion in terms of decorum and those sorts of things. So we haven't been able to publish a straight recording of the thing. And then because it is typically about 5 or 6 of us in the room talking very quickly, it's hard to take notes. But I did make an attempt 2 meetings ago on this. I was at a town Monday, so this was 2 ago. But it was just Steve Dongbo and I that were able to attend this one. And I did try to take some actual notes here about sort of our decisions on things and why we're making them. We've also just tried to do a better job when replying to sort of a review for committee issues about why these things, why we're making the decisions that we are, because very often, I can understand why it's frustrating for you guys to get 3 or 4 lines, but you have to understand that they were the result of, often 30, 40, 50 minutes of conversation where we're hotly debating something and there's 50-50 sort of disagreement in the room, and we ultimately come to a conclusion, but I get why that's annoying to not see the sort of thinking behind the conclusion. But as many of you know, it's very hard to take notes when you're in flight, and it's even harder to say, hey, let's pause the conversation in our super rare meeting that we only get once a week for an hour and a half to talk about these RFCs. We have another meeting that's an hour on Wednesdays as well to talk about the issues, but 2.5 hours in the week, and hold on, let's pause for 10 minutes so I can take notes throughout the meeting is a little bit of a non-starter. So we're trying to figure out what to do here. I'm going to look at the questions here because I'm sure folks are going right in, giving feedback on this. Joel says you've noticed the detailed committee review comments. Yeah, we're doing our best. I think we can probably do better. Joel says, oh, this is in regards to the and the or. Yes, like we should probably use parens where you can. I am remembering a question I got to ask you. Just one second, Rob. But the I'm going to publish these publicly. I hope that these are helpful to people and they give sort of a better sense of what we're doing day to day. I can't promise that I'm going to have them published every single time, but hopefully this is more of a regular thing that makes gives you guys a better sense. One of the things I've heard that's a frustration, and I know this has come from Kirk, especially on Twitter in the last couple of days, and I haven't been able to dive really into the conversation at length yet. But there's a sort of a frustration from some folks about the model of using GitHub issues for PRs, or excuse me, GitHub PRs for RFC reviews. We didn't start with PR reviews. We started with issue discussions, and one of the difficulties there is really that you're unable to attribute sort of lines of an RFC to the comment that's being made, and so we felt that PRs were really a step up in being able to annotate the document in a way that was more consumable by the author. The thing that I get frustrated with on GitHub PRs is really the sort of resolve conversation aspect, and the fact that when the commits become outdated with where the comments were made, you can very quickly lose comments that are still relevant and that might not have been addressed by the author yet, and they just sort of get collapsed in by GitHub, and this problem becomes worse in ones like the PowerShell GET 3.0 RFC. But I would love for people to make some suggestions about other tooling that would make sense. Our requirements coming from our side are really, we want these things to be transparent. We want annotations to be relevant to the line number. That was really something that across the team everyone stated is a very helpful thing to have. Sort of word style commenting where you can highlight a bit or highlight a line and attach your comment there. But I don't know of something beyond GitHub PRs that makes that an easy process, especially when we're relating it to other GitHub issues or relating it to other documents in the thing. Kirk, I know that you did publish an issue, I believe, in the RFC repo that we looked at yesterday, and I think we agreed with most of it, if not all of it. And This was the suggestions on how the RFC process can be removed or improved, excuse me. And I encourage everyone to jump in on this one for sort of what we should do instead. RFC proposals submitted as issues, I don't think we're going to go back to that. Again, there were a number of problems with that that we had. The PR review is really the way that we think we're going to do this one. Although again, I'm open to other suggestions, but this was so much harder to understand what the heck people were talking about when they complained about a specific problem in the RFC. However, the broken link aspect of this and the fact that the RFCs get moved around based on their stage, we agree that doesn't really make a lot of sense. Jim is writing some automation that we want to talk to him more about. He wasn't able to make our committee meeting yesterday, but or some of it we didn't have this aspect of the conversation. But yeah, we basically want to put them all in a folder, and we also want that automation to look at RFCs, and there will be some workflow there that sort of uses webhooks to keep the numbering in check as we merge the things, and to have some sort of table or list that groups them by stage and by number that will make it a lot easier to traverse these things without us having to move the RFCs around between various folders and keep breaking the links. So a bunch of this is totally relevant and totally fair. But again, the and yeah, like having notifications like this totally makes sense to me. But the issue, I don't think we're going to go back to the issue discussions just because of the difficulty in managing those. But you're saying Google Docs as a comment system. Yeah, and like there's so many of these things, right? Like, I mean, we could use Office 365 for the same thing. There's plenty of commenting and the chat built in and all this, that, and the other. But then how do we link that back to PowerShell? How do we easily generate those issues that are tracking the work? How do we close those things out in a way that really makes sense with the open source model that we already have? So this is saying split review of RFC out from comments and questions as possible as well. Like maybe we build, but then again, like as soon as you split those things, it's not all in one place, and then it's just that much harder to manage and address all the feedback. It's hard enough for us to go look at the one list of flat feedback versus, the two lists. So quite a few more sophisticated code review tools like PullPanda, which GitHub just bought. I definitely would love to look into that, Joel. I haven't seen PullPanda. We experimented with Reviewable, and it turned out to just be a lot of extra weight and clicking for what amounted to roughly the same thing as GitHub reviews, which we didn't have GitHub reviews when we first experimented with Reviewable, but now that we do, they're good enough. But PullPanda sounds like an interesting thing. I didn't know that they made that purchase, so we'll give that a check out. So I will, and add comments to, this was a great issue, and I appreciate that, Kirk, for filing that, and per Joel's recommendation, and I'll say J. Cole, since we have two Joels in the call here. Cool. Okay, 15 minutes left. I do want to make sure I look at this issue. It looks like there were 3 comments made here. What's the status of PowerShell 7 Preview 2 shipping in mid-July? What's the status of $:and and question operator implementations? So it was listed as a high want for PS7, but haven't seen any work on it yet. I don't actually know these operators. Are you familiar with these, Rob?
Yeah, so that's ternary and null coalescing.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah,
and yeah,
those are assigned.
Those are happening.
Yeah.
I don't think that they're particularly complicated. I don't know that we have RFCs published for them yet, but I think that it's pretty straightforward what the implementation would look like there, and we do want to do that.
I think it's fair to say that the bash operator stuff is a bit of a canary for those, in the sense of like, it's one of the first real syntactic introductions we've thought about making in a while, and now that I've sort of got a proof of concept, it should be much easier to do other operator work like that. So yeah.
Yep. Could you summarize PowerShell Get 3 RFC? Check out the new rewrite. It looks like you asked that question an hour before Steve published his rewrite. So there's a new RFC, and you should review it if you're interested. Ely101 asks, hey, why is send mail message obsolete but no replacement? We discussed this at length at PSConf.eu, and I made a big reply to the RFC there. Obsolescence and deprecation we treat as equivalent, which is exactly the same as what .NET does. There's a hyperlink to that in the send mail message RFC discussion. But basically, obsolescence or deprecation means that we are disrecommending usage of a thing. There are plenty of APIs that get moved forward that are deprecated, that continue to be disrecommended, but that ultimately we leave in place for backwards compatibility. SMTP is very difficult to do securely. There are a number of concerns that are located at this link about why you shouldn't be using the APIs that we're using underneath this SMTP client, underneath the sort of send mail message commandlets. You'll see here it's compat only. It's great for one-off emails from tools. Doesn't scale the modern requirements of the protocol. There's plenty of good use cases if you're in an internal environment sending internal SMTP messages over an internal SMTP server where you don't need all those things to be secure. But again, we're disrecommending usage in the same way that we disrecommend usage of plain text passwords or
TLS 1.1.
TLS 1.1, yeah, which is going to continue to be in .NET for a very long time, but it will be disrecommended via deprecation for a very long time. So we at some point might do the mail kit, but mail kit's a little bit heavyweight for a single commandlet, and this may have to be an external module, but we haven't closed there yet. Why can't we splat a subvariable in array hash table? Is this an intentional limitation?
Enhanced splatting is the RFC that deals with stuff like that.
Yeah, I think we actually did.
That was Jason's RFC.
Yes.
It's been accepted, but it's just a lot of work, and it's never really been.
Yes.
Nobody's
so if you
moved
go
to implement it.
If you go real deep in the RFCs here to the splatting.
I think it's closed because it's merged, because it was accepted.
This is RFC 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we actually discussed this one at length. This was when we first got up and going with the.
You'll need to look at the source for the full thing, I think.
Yeah, just check this one out. It's RFC 2. It is, yeah, it's merged into the 2 folder here. Generalized splatting.
That's
I'd give that one a check. Used to reference variables in an expression and perhaps this is an argument. I don't know that this is specifically addressed.
Yeah, I don't know that either.
But check that one out, and then we can discuss that in the future.
The intent of that RFC is to basically allow to use any expression that is a hash table for splatting.
Right. Can you add support to provide an array to default parameter set name that will be evaluated in the provided order? This will help simplify and reduce the needed parameter sets. Array to default parameter set name. That's interesting. I don't know about this issue, but if it's been discussed here, I think this kind of is something that we would consider taking implementation for. It's not a super high priority for us. I think, and Kirk's statement is really generally applicable here, which is whenever you give us scenarios about why something is important, it's going to move up the priority of that thing, because we really very often see these as sort of academic questions, and having some examples is helpful. Can you please talk about the RFC process? Yes, we did. How can we speed up getting an RFC to be actually added and not just stuck in a PR issue for months? Totally understand. Again, we're trying to get that done. One of the things you'll note that I made in the RFC discussion notes here, which again, I still need to get published, but I would like to write an RFC on the process for accepting outside committee members. A big part of our difficulty is, again, there's just a lot of us that are very, very busy all the time, and having more folks that can help us get to quorum and make decisions on a more regular basis would be very helpful. Additionally, having some folks that are outside of Microsoft will increase the asynchronous nature of our communications, which means that we'll be forced to make a lot more of the comments and reviews in issues and PRs rather than in, spoken committees. And while that is very helpful for having high bandwidth conversations, and we'll continue to have those, we also recognize that really we should be doing this in a more decentralized, distributed way where, part of our daily job is just coming in and responding to these RFCs. But I unfortunately go, entire days where I don't get to open GitHub at all because there's just flat line of meetings and all this other stuff. So trying to figure it out, but we will have more to share there as we get this automation built. How about on Markdown for the help system? Great question. I don't think this is going to happen for 7.0. We're investigating internally a sort of re-rev of the pipeline for doing documentation, and as that sort of comes to fruition, like we need to continue to support 5, we need to continue to support 6. So, it's all going to have to be CAB or zip based on some level initially. But as that comes to fruition, we can sort of figure out how to plug those in and make a pure Markdown system based on the Markdown commandlets a little more useful. The Joel Salas is good. External committee members, yep. We'll figure it out.
The answer to Joel's other question was yes, by the way.
Oh, I just hit publish and
Okay.
Sorry, Joel. Are these recorded for others to view later? Yes, they are. Unfortunately, I'm looking here at a PR that never got merged. To merge, I'm just going to go ahead and merge it because I'm not getting. Oh, Steve says fix a thing.
Commit suggestion.
Sure. Because I broke formatting. I don't think I really did. I think it's just the stupid syntax highlighting in the.
Yeah.
If you use an asterisk, you need to escape it with a backslash.
Yeah. But very often the syntax grammar here lies as comparison to the. So I'm going to go ahead and just do this while we're on the call. While I'm doing that, Sean, do you want to talk to the 7 docs?
Yeah, so just want to let everyone know that for the 7.0 release, we've gone ahead and created a version 7 folder in the docs, in the staging branch for PowerShell docs, rather than running it as a release branch. And I'm working on getting it where this will be published live. So in the version picker on the documentation website, it'll list PowerShell 7 preview for that version of the documentation. If you are contributing to docs and you are making changes to version 6 content, those changes also need to be made in the version 7 content for the same topic. If you were making changes in the version 7 content that is about new features specific to version 7, please submit that as a separate pull request from pull requests that contain updates to other versions, just so we can track things a little easier.
Yep, so that's going to show up in the version picker. Definitely do it in both places if it makes sense in both places, and I've pasted the link there. To wrap up that question on whether or not we publish these things, now that I've merged the RFC, yes, we do publish them. If you go to aka.ms/ps community call, it will bring you here. I may do a refactor of this so we don't have this giant flat list here, but it's just a pain in the butt. But if you do scroll all the way down, there's a link to all the YouTube recordings, transcripts, etc. And that goes to our YouTube channel where you can watch the old calls. So definitely, if you're interested in catching up on those, check them out. The last questions we have, Tyler. Yeah, Tyler's been recording over Twitch as well. Check him out, Tyler Leonhardt. What is the roadmap timeline to ship PowerShell? And again, I think we addressed this one before, Mike, but we don't have.
You just never published this.
Oh, I didn't.
Yeah.
Okay. It was 10. Well, 10/24. He put it again.
Okay.
So again, like no current ETA. We're still figuring out what this looks like. It's going to, be added in other ways initially, like we're still trying to get added to the store. We're still trying to get, some kind of wrapper or placeholder that keeps updating a little, makes it a little easier. But it is a difficult scenario, and we're still working through the support lifecycle stuff with .NET and Windows. I know we only have 3 minutes left, but Sydney, do you want to just briefly talk to the downtime and yeah?
Yeah, sure. So for those of you who weren't aware, I believe it was last Tuesday, the gallery was down from around 8:15 a.m. our time to around 11. So about 3 hours. So thanks to those of you for bearing with us. We were able to associate the problem with our password rotation, and we had introduced a character that was breaking the build and ultimately took down the service. So we've since fixed that password rolling script and made some changes to this process, so that in the future we won't bring down the site, and we've gone through our sort of internal post-mortem process. So that's sort of the gist of what went down. But yeah, just thanks for those of you guys who reached out and made sure we were aware, and helped promote that on Twitter. And thanks for bearing with us.
Hey, I'll just add one thing. There's a little bit more detail on the PS Gallery status page. I put the link in the Q&A there. And one thing that we're kind of aware of, and we're interested in kind of feedback on, is what is the best way of actually sort of informing people of what's going on. So, we have this status page on GitHub, but I suspect that 99% of our users don't actually know about it. And so it doesn't really help anybody that much. We could be listed in the Azure status page, but I don't think most people consider the PowerShell Gallery to be an Azure service anyway. So probably the best solution would be to do some kind of Twitter style fail whale kind of thing that we actually show when you go to the gallery itself. But that's work, and we won't be able to do it like immediately. If anyone has any sort of thoughts on how best we can alert people to this situation, if it ever happens again, that would be great to hear.
Awesome. Joel also recommended real quick the rubberduck.io. We will check that out as well. Regarding inboxing in Windows, my expectation is it would come in a Windows feature update like OpenSSH client. It's likely going to be something like that, Ryan. But again, the difficulty there is that those features are also
constrained by the same lifecycle.
They're controlled by they're constrained by the same lifecycle. So so it's like there may be some little small print annotation that we can make there that allows us to do fix forward, like PowerShell 7 may be upgraded to 8 after 3 years, or 7.4 or whatever. But we don't currently have that figured out quite yet. But it will. We're going to keep lowering the bar to be inbox in Windows over time. So we do have to get going. We're going to lose the room here any minute. And I appreciate all of you joining on the call. Thanks for being patient with us. Again, bunch of stuff here. I'm going to publish these notes as soon as I possibly can, and the recordings as well. Hopefully those don't sit in limbo like the last March through May did. But give these all a look, and yeah, thanks for joining the call, everyone. So see you guys later.